Hey guys, we are here with Anna Carroll, an engineer from Dharma, and she's going to do a talk about Dharma's new social payments application. And I'll let her take it from here. Can you guys confirm in the chat that you can hear her when she starts talking? You have to start talking.
Oh, hi. Hey, y'all. Can you hear me? Are we good? Awesome. Okay, awesome. Thanks so much, everybody. Hey, guys. So yeah, my name is Anna. As Sinju said, I'm from Dharma. I'm an engineer there. I'm going to talk to y'all about how we built social payments today. So I'm going to toggle myself down and let's get started. Awesome. So quick little background on me before I get started. I graduated from Stanford in 2018, studied computer science there. And while I was there, I co-led the Stanford Blockchain Collective with a bunch of other awesome students. I did the Kleiner Perkins Product Fellowship when I graduated from Stanford. And then as soon as I finished that up, I started working at Dharma as a product engineer. And that's what I do right now. Cool. So yeah, we hear a ton about mass adoption in crypto. And many people, both inside and outside this room, have come to believe that decentralized finance is going to be kind of the use case that gets us there. But before we can kind of get to this holy grail of mass adoption, I believe, and at Dharma, we believe that crypto is going to need to be easy for everyone to use. And it takes a lot of technical heavy lifting to abstract away the messy parts of crypto. Making crypto easy to use is way more than just making it pretty. So yeah, you have to kind of design around these hard problems so that everybody can benefit from the power of decentralized finance. So we're all familiar with these problems, with these design problems, managing private keys, paying gas, waiting for transactions to mine, dealing with chain reorgs. Stuff like this is just too hard for kind of your average user to figure out, and we shouldn't be asking them to do that. So I'm just here to say, like, UX is much more than just a pretty UI. You have to design around these problems from a technical perspective, and I think that's part of what makes it really, really fun to be a developer in this space. So yeah, without further ado, today I want to talk to y'all about going under the hood of how we built social payments at Dharma. And I'm going to put an emphasis on kind of the crypto-y parts of the stack. There's a ton that went into this feature across the stack, but I personally kind of implemented some of the more like crypto-focused bits of the feature. So that's what we'll be focusing on today. After the talk, I'd be super happy to take any of your questions about any of the process of building the feature. So let's talk about social payments. What do I mean by social payments? So recently we launched a feature where Dharma users can send money to any Twitter handle on the internet. So the recipient of the funds doesn't need to have signed up for Dharma yet. They simply download the app, link their Twitter account, and they can claim their payment. So this is something that we're really excited about. We think it's really cool. And we've talked about, so we think it's really exciting that you can kind of pay anyone on Twitter right now. But we've talked about kind of extending this to other services. So we don't want to stop there. We're thinking it'd be dope if you could pay anyone on the internet seamlessly. And we accomplished all of this in a decentralized, non-custodial, peer-to-peer manner. So funds are sent directly from the smart wallet of one user to another one. And so I'm going to walk through kind of how we accomplish this from a technical perspective. So some of you might be familiar with Dharma DAI. Dharma DAI is, or DDI, is an ERC20 compliant token that was created by my team. And DDI is a wrapper around Compound DAI or CDI. So as many of you may know, Compound DAI or CDI is another ERC20 token built by the Compound protocol. And these tokens are minted when a user deposits funds into the Compound protocol. So if I have DAI that I want to supply to Compounds, I go ahead and put it in Compounds, and in return, I receive CDI. And then the user can redeem those C tokens at any time for the initial principal that they put into the protocol, plus the interest that's been generated based on that principal. So these tokens are essentially a quite elegant vehicle by which the interest that's generated by borrowers on the Compound protocol is passed on to lenders that provide the capital. So as I said, Dharma DAI is a wrapper around CDI, and it was built pretty simply at first. It's pretty straight, has some of basically the same features as CDI, but we built it with an upgradable contract. And we did that so that we can kind of develop on it more in the future and add cool new features. And one thing that Dharma DAI has that CDI doesn't are natively built-in meta transactions. So right now, there's only one type of meta transaction supported by the DDI contract. Users can submit a meta transaction to increase their allowance set for another user. But in the future, we may upgrade DDI to support more meta transaction types. And we're also upgrading the DDI contract as part of our work on layer 2 scalability, which is what I'm working on right now. We're implementing optimistic rollup. So I'd be happy to take any questions about that particular project after the talk as well. Okay, so we have meta transactions on the DDI contract, and let's talk about what that means. So meta transactions, one super simple way to think about them is like using a courier to deliver a signed document. So let's say, I want to buy a house and I have a contract that says, I'm going to, pay off this debt in XYZ amount of time. And I sign that contract, and I want to have that sent off to kind of the interested parties. When I do that, it doesn't matter who actually delivered the document. Like, nobody cares who's actually passing off the piece of paper. What matters is that I signed it and that my signature is real and valid. So similarly, we can kind of do something like this with Ethereum transactions, where we can generate a transaction, have somebody sign it, and then anybody can submit it on their behalf. All that matters is that the signature is real. So meta transactions, these meta transactions on the Dharma DAI contract are a really critical part of the crypto stack that built social sends at Dharma. So the first step in kind of generating a social send is to generate a message hash on the Dharma DAI contract to increase the user's allowance to a specialized contract called the Transfer Facilitator contract. And so that looks like DDI.get meta transaction hash, and we kind of generate this special message. Then next, the user signs the message, and that message is passed back to Dharma's backend, where it's kind of kept for safekeeping. At that point, we have a signed message that can grant the transfer facilitator permission to use the user's funds. And at that point, anyone can submit this meta transaction in order to execute its effects. And unlike the legal documents in the example I provided, the Dharma DAI contract can prove with cryptography that the user's signature is valid. Okay, so that's it. At that point, the social send has been initiated. And at this point, no funds have been moved on chain. No transactions have been submitted. We simply have this special signed message hash that we can use when the time comes. Okay, so I talked about this transfer facilitator contract. And this plays a really important role in the mechanics of social sends on chain. We built it specifically for the purpose of facilitating social transfers. So what happens with the transfer facilitator contract, it has one dedicated method that essentially inputs a signed meta transaction like the one that I told you all about before, and the address of a recipient for the funds. The transfer facilitator submits that meta transaction to the Dharma DAI contract, which then grants itself allowance to pull the funds from the user's account. Then, as part of the same atomic transaction, the transfer facilitator moves the funds directly from the sender to the recipient. And so, yeah, this is how we use meta transactions to actually move funds on chain. And so now we've kind of talked about all the moving pieces involved in making a social transfer work. Let's put it all together into one simple flow. So we have Alice, who is a Dharma user, as you can see by her, Dharma Smart Wallet address at the bottom there. And she's got some funds in her Dharma Smart Wallet. And she's friends with Bob, and she wants to send him funds, but he is actually not on Dharma. But luckily, Bob is on Twitter. So Alice decides to initiate a social send to Bob to get these funds to him. So first step, as we talked about before, Alice generates a message hash. And this is like making a document that says, I want to let the transfer facilitator spend $5 of my DDI. Next, Alice signs the meta transaction and she gives it to Dharma for safekeeping. Then Alice tweets at Bob to kind of notify him that he's received this payment. Bob sees the tweet, he's interested, and he signs up for Dharma. Now, at this point, Bob gets a Dharma Smart Wallet. As you can see down here, he's got his fancy new Dharma Smart Wallet address. So to just quickly pause here, as some of y'all might have kind of figured out implicitly, we aren't able to just sign a full transaction, sending the funds from Alice to Bob directly when she tries to initiate the send, because Bob doesn't have a Dharma Smart Wallet at that point. So there's no way that we could input the address to send Bob's funds and sign that transaction and just submit that. So this is why we actually need to use the meta transactions. We need to be able to kind of specify at a later date where to send these funds. Okay, so Bob signs up for Dharma and he gets his Dharma Smart Wallet. Bob links his Twitter. And by linking his Twitter, Bob proves that he's the owner of the funds. So at this point, Alice has only told us, like, I want at Bob to receive these funds. And then by linking his Twitter, Bob proves that he is the person who the funds were intended for. Okay, finally, Bob accepts the payment. And this kicks off the special transaction that the transfer facilitator does that I talked about earlier. So the transfer facilitator will submit the meta transaction hash to the DDI contract. And at this point, the transfer facilitator is able to move the funds on behalf of Alice. And as part of this exact same transaction, the transfer facilitator moves the funds directly from Alice's wallet into Bob's. And at that point, we are done. So the social transfer has finished. So that is all I had in terms of slides for y'all today. I wanted to leave a good deal of time at the end here to take your questions, so we could keep this kind of interactive. So I would love to take your questions now. And it looks like I got the first one here from somebody called Op. Oops. But can't Alice spend the funds before Bob claims them? So this is a great question, a great point. So as Op is picked up on here, Alice's funds are sitting in her wallet the whole time. So what's stopping her from kind of double spending those funds? Go ahead and spending the funds before Bob signs up for Dharma. So Dharma Smart Wallets are joint custodial. So what that means is that every transaction that needs to be submitted is submitted by both Alice and Dharma. So Dharma has kind of a signing key that we use to say, hey, this transaction is valid. It was submitted by a Dharma user, and this is kind of accurate. And this is a way for us to kind of provide additional security for users. So that, if somebody gets a hold of our user's browser or their device, we could kind of have some like fraud detection techniques and ways to stop fraudulent transactions. So essentially all that happens when Alice initiates this transfer is that we debit the amount from her balance in the Dharma app. And so it seems to Alice through the Dharma app that those funds are not in her wallet anymore, that she's not able to spend them, even though those funds are still sitting in her wallet. So that's kind of the answer to your question. I would love any sort of follow-up questions based on that. But what you might pick up on based on that is, Dharma Smart Wallets are joint custodial. And so the users don't sort of have the complete personal autonomous control over the funds in their wallet. It is a kind of a joint custody situation. And this is something that I think is really good to talk about in kind of like a UX focused talk like this. When we're building Dharma, we're kind of constantly working with trade-offs as to kind of how to make something super easy and usable for the user, safe for them, while at the same time kind of trying to remain as decentralized, as non-custodial as possible, because we believe people should have control of their funds. So there's a lot of situations in which we're kind of dealing with trade-offs like this that we talk about a lot through our design process. So that's just kind of one way that manifests. How does Bob make use of the DAI that he received if he is not part of the crypto ecosystem before? Can he transfer to a bank account? Yeah, that's a great question. So on Dharma, you can, in fact, initiate an ACH transfer. You can link up your bank account and transfer funds to your bank account, just like Venmo. You can also link up your debit card and deposit funds using your debit card, again, just like Venmo. Our goal is really to make crypto accessible and easy to use for everybody. We think that, DeFi is like just having composable protocols, kind of just creates these opportunities for really amazing experiences, like earning really high interest that are not available to consumers in kind of the centralized finance world. So we really wanted to make an app that was as simple for my dad to use as anybody else. They can initiate ACH transfers to their bank account. Does Alice still get the interest on the money that is earmarked for the send? So the way that we do it, Bob will actually get that interest. So when Alice sends the funds to Bob, when Bob receives a tweet like, "Hey, at Bob, you just got this transfer on Dharma," those funds are actually earning interest for him the whole time. So when he comes and collects them, he's actually earned some interest already before he's even, been on the platform. When the recipient creates a Dharma account, is the transfer facilitator able to spend the DDI however it sees fit, or only for the specific transfer? That's a great question. So the transfer facilitator is able to send the DDI to any Dharma smart wallet. So that's basically the protection that's put on this. The transfer facilitator couldn't send it out to any contract or any, MetaMask wallet that it wants. And we did this, for security purposes. We didn't want anybody to be able to kind of take control of the meta transaction hashes and steal these users' money. So we kind of put some guardrails on it. This is another kind of cool bit of crypto magic. When we submit this transaction to kind of pull the funds from Alice to Bob's wallet, we also submit Bob's smart wallet address and Bob's initial signing key. So Dharma smart wallets are counterfactually generated. And because of that, we can actually create a proof saying, hey, this address, this recipient address is a Dharma smart wallet. I can prove it. Here's the initial signing key. And then we'll use the counterfactual smart wallet factory to actually prove that that initial signing key resolves to the intended recipient address. So short answer, no, the transfer facilitator cannot spend the funds however it sees fit. It has to send it to a Dharma smart wallet. But yes, it could send it technically to any Dharma smart wallet. Does Dharma use Wire? Yes, we presently use Wire for on-ramps, for both on and on-ramps, on and off-ramps, debit card deposits, and ACH transfers, we use Wire. Any plans to implement KYC? So yeah, it's a bit of a tough question to answer because KYC, a lot of people say like, oh, are you going to implement KYC? KYC isn't like one thing. And it's kind of like saying like, are you going to implement security? Like there's many kind of layers of security, and you can kind of get progressively more secure and do more to kind of implement more security. Yes, we presently have kind of methods to get to know the users, to detect fraud, and do things like that. So we already have some sort of like basic KYC in place. But yeah, that's kind of my answer. So you're just eating the cost of the fee for onboarding and off. Yes. Dharma provides DAI to our users in exchange for US dollars. You can get one DAI for $1 US. And so Dharma takes it kind of as our responsibility to manage our funds so that we can basically provide an on-ramp like one-to-one from DAI to US dollars. Yeah, so we do eat those fees. Let's see. When the recipient creates a Dharma account, is the transfer facilitator, we already answered that. How many signatures does it have, and how many is needed to transfer the funds? I'm not sure what you mean by how many transfers does it have. Like what is it in the question? If you like message in an amendment to the question, I can answer it. Who will have access to the private information, such as an address linked to Twitter? So are you talking about their smart wallet address being linked to their Twitter? Okay, so I'm seeing Ian submit another question. So how many signatures does it have, and how many a smart contract? Are you talking about the transfer facilitator or the smart wallet? Sorry, I'm just want to understand the question. I guess the short answer is that generally transactions on the Dharma smart wallet require 2 signatures, one from the user and one from Dharma. The transfer facilitator contract only needs the one signature, the one signed meta transaction hash. So the smart wallet requires 2 signatures, one from Dharma's signing key and one from the user. Did Dharma need to register as a money transmitter in order to facilitate the transfer functionality? Kevin, we didn't need to facilitate the transfer functionality, but we have registered as a money transmitter. And the reason that we've done that is because we want to continue to improve our on and off ramps in our application. And we're exploring a bunch of different ways to do that, to expand geographical access, to increase the limits that users can, like how much users can deposit at one time, different partnerships, etc. So we have registered as a money transmitter, but not because we needed to implement this feature. Cool. Who will have access to the private information, such as an address linked to Twitter? Ian, again, has asked this one. So Dharma stores this information, but technically, like, users can kind of send funds to anyone who's linked their Twitter account on the Dharma app, and technically they could see the address on chain as a result of that. So it's not like we keep that information like super secret. I mean, it's all on chain at the end of the day, but that the mapping from a Twitter handle to an address is, we store that on our servers. Is DDI a synthetic, or it's DAI drawn from the Maker protocol? If it's a synth, how do you keep the peg and determine the supply? Thanks for that question, Frank. So DDI is not I guess you could I don't think you would call it a synthetic asset. So basically CDI, the thing that DDI is a wrapper around. I'll answer the question for CDI first. CDI is essentially an asset that is a representative of the principal that a user has deposited plus the interest that that principal has earned since the time that they deposited it. So if you were using the term synthetic, like very kind of loosely, technically you could say like, you know, it's representative of the underlying value of the DAI and the interest. But no, it's not like DAI in that it's not kind of an asset whose value is kind of, you know, determined based on a peg or over collateralization or anything like that. The value of DDI is based on the value of CDI. The value of CDI is based on DAI, just an amount of DAI that has been deposited, as well as interest generated by the compound protocol. So Frank, I hope that answers your question adequately. Are these tweets or DMs or either one of the two? Bob may not want all of his Twitter followers to know that he got money from Alice. Yeah, so you can tweet, you can DM, you can also just copy the link and text it to somebody if you want to, or send it in whatever way that you want. So you could kind of, you wouldn't necessarily need to make a public tweet. Initially, we had kind of a bot that was publicly announcing all of these transfers on Twitter. But based on kind of like some of Twitter's kind of like, I guess, spam guidelines, they detected it as spam and we're kind of shadow banning those tweets. So we had the users send the link themselves. Does Dharma generate IRS 1099 forms? So we don't presently. Is ETH needed to pay gas fees for a receiver to receive DDI? No. So on Dharma, we actually use meta transactions for all the transactions that are submitted on the platform. So users never pay gas on Dharma. Dharma pays all of the gas. And we do that, you know, yes, to kind of make it simpler and make it easier and make it, you know, an attractive feature, like you don't have to pay gas on Dharma, but also just because the vast majority of normal users aren't going to be holding ETH. They're not going to know how to submit transactions. They're not going to know how to know if their transaction has mined. All of that complexity we zip up in our backend and deal with on behalf of the user. So paying gas is just one of the things that's kind of abstracted into the backend for Dharma users. What's the difference between DDI and CDI? So as I said, DDI is a wrapper around CDI. So DDI is essentially, it's very similar to CDI. It's kind of like a one-to-one mapping for the time being. There's a couple main differences. The first one is that 10% of the interest generated by all DDI is put into reserves in the DDI contract. So DDI earns slightly less interest than CDI. Another difference is that the DDI contract, the ERC20 token contract, is upgradable. So we can submit upgrades to that contract and build some cool features on it in the future. And then the third one is DDI has natively enabled meta transactions, which CDI does not. So those are three kind of differences that exist right now. Although the DDI contract is going to be getting a big makeover when we launch our layer 2 optimistic rollup scalability work, hopefully soon.
Cool. So I think we can probably take one last question.
I see one last question. It says, once a receiver got DDI, will he need ETH to pay for fees? No, like I said, there's no gas, no users pay for gas on Dharma. We handle all the transaction submissions and gas and everything like that. So
awesome.
Thank you guys so much for the great questions. It's been great having y'all, and I hope that this was instructive.
Yeah, it definitely was. All right. We're going to transition to our next session now. Thanks so much for taking the time. It was great.
Thanks, y'all.
All right. Take care.